Thank you guys so much for watching The Edge of Existence. I'm here with director James Suter, so thank you so much for being with us. I just wanted to get started with asking how you got involved in this project.
Well, firstly, thanks so much for representing our film. It's an honor to have it on your platform, and thank you all so much for attending this film festival. So, essentially, I'm a Cape Town filmmaker and photographer. We've got a small crew based in South Africa, and we spend quite a bit of our time traveling throughout Africa, telling various stories, particularly focusing on conservation. And we were working up in the western corridor of the Serengeti in Tanzania, and we were actually working with a conservation organization at the time, and learned about a story which really hit home for both myself and the team. And this story was a story that we felt was untold, and it was a story talking to human-wildlife conflicts. So people living in areas where wildlife exists and the difficulties that they have in living with wildlife.
This story is really well balanced between talking about both animals and human, and doesn't have a super specific point of view with like supporting either. Why was it important to you to tell such a balanced story from all perspectives?
Yeah, I think we wanted to go into this project with an objective view. And I think that's quite difficult because, I think so often one takes a particular view, and often the case is, obviously empathizing for animals and the suffering of animals and the shrinking of wilderness areas all over the world. But I think as we got into the story, which took us around 3 years to complete, so we really got to understand the characters we were working with, and understand the situation as a whole. And I think what we really had to focus on doing was remaining objective and trying to create an objective story. I think it was incredibly challenging for us because we would see such brutal scenes with regards to wilderness areas and wildlife being so badly affected by the people who obviously live in these areas, and vice versa. People being literally losing their livelihoods because of having to live with wildlife on a daily basis. And I think for us, we believe in conservation, but we also believe in having to take people into consideration. And I think we wanted to tell a story where conservationists are there to protect these wilderness areas, and we encourage protecting these wilderness areas, but at the same time we also wanted to share the challenges which we felt is really kind of the untold story of the suffering of people who live in areas where there are large populations of wildlife.
Yeah. I watched a lot of films about conservation for this festival, and it was really refreshing to see yours because I honestly don't get to see both of those perspectives too often. It's actually quite rare. So this one really stood out to me. You really had a diverse cast of people in your film, from rangers to farmers, and a poacher, and the police officer. How did you get access or even find all of those different types of people?
Yeah, it was incredibly challenging. And I think, again, one of the reasons why we had to spend so much time on the ground. So the first month that we spent on the ground, obviously before doing pre-production, we identified the kind of characters that we would like to tell the story on, both sides of the coin, in terms of the, people being able to represent, the conservation, and obviously people representing the communities that are affected by human-wildlife conflict. But we literally spent the first month on the ground looking for characters that would be able to represent those two entities, and characters that people would be able to empathize with and relate to in a way. And I think we were quite lucky with our characters in that we feel like you really get to know the characters throughout the film. And, these aren't actors. These are people literally, in some cases, dedicating their lives to conservation. And in other cases, just trying to survive some very difficult situations.
Yeah, I think you did that really well. It was surprising to see the diversity and the people represented, um, and it was told really beautifully. We don't often get to see people who were poachers in films. It's pretty, rare, and to be told with like a gentleness that you guys did was really cool. Um, what were like, there was a lot of intense moments in the film, obviously, and a lot of dangerous moments as well. What was that like for you as a filmmaker? And even just the basic question of how did you guys keep yourselves safe?
Yeah, there were some incredibly challenging moments, and we certainly found ourselves in some really dangerous situations. And I mean, I guess you could see that, from actually watching the film. I've got a background in guiding, so I spent quite a lot of time in the bush, and our team is actually very familiar with working in the African bush. So they understand wildlife behavior, how to react. But we found ourselves in situations which were rather bizarre, having to chase elephants out at night, out of farmers' lands. And there was obviously a scene with the hippo where, that was probably one of the most challenging things, to film, not only because it was so graphic to witness, but people were literally in a frenzy, and that's literally how hungry these people were in terms of harvesting that animal. So as a team, again, I think it's down to experience, spending a lot of time in Africa working with both people and wildlife. But certainly there were moments where, we had some close calls, and yeah, had to really think quickly on our feet in terms of making sure we got out of those, safely.
Yeah. The last questions I wanted to ask you was, our festival is really dedicated to sharing, our tagline is stories that inspire. We like to share films that inspire change and have an impact. And why is it important to you as a storyteller to share stories like that?
So yeah, this film, we hope has an impact. That was the reason why we made the film. And I think firstly, with regards to most people outside the conservation space not really understanding what human wildlife conflict actually is, and what a massive problem it is, not just in Africa, but around the world. And essentially what we wanted to do is use, this little corner of Tanzania, the Western Corridor, as a microcosm of what happens around the world with regards to human wildlife conflicts. And I think it's a relatively untold story. And it's a story that hasn't necessarily been told yet, and it's an incredibly complex story. So it's a challenging story to tell. And what our hope is not only to educate people, but also possibly encourage change. We look at a number of ways in which, in this particular area, one can mitigate human wildlife conflicts. But Tanzania, unlike other countries in Africa, neighboring countries like Kenya, has a policy where they don't believe in fencing. And, certainly we ask that question with regards to, should fences be considered some form of barrier between, the communities and wildlife areas. And, that's obviously quite a controversial question that we're asking, but possibly you never know that, policies can change. And again, that's our hope with this film, is to educate people and possibly actually encourage change.
Do you know if there's been an update on, at the end of the film, you guys talk about there's the semi-permeable fence getting built. Do you know if there's been an update on that?
So that's currently being built, and is not necessarily funded by the government, but certainly the community that we worked with are incredibly grateful, for that fence, because again, it provides a barrier between them and, I guess, the biggest problem animal for them, and that's the elephants moving in and out of the community land. So, I'm happy to report that that project is still going full steam ahead.
That's great. Have you seen any other impacts from screenings of the film so far, or any inspiration for change?
Sorry, I missed that question.
Oh, have you seen any impacts from people watching the film so far?
Yeah, I think, it's certainly a challenging film to watch. It's incredibly graphic, and it's, I guess, a difficult story to digest. But, from the reactions that we've had with regards to, people watching the film, it's a story, again, that people didn't know. They didn't realize just what a massive impact human-wildlife conflict plays within the conservation space. And I think, again, with our exponential growth in human population, it's a story and a situation that we need to address sooner rather than later. And hopefully people just start talking about that and educating each other. And again, that's that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. On that note, is there anywhere that people watching this right now should go to learn more about your film or find more information about this issue?
So absolutely. So the anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more about the conservation work being done in the area that we filmed can visit the Grumeti Fund. It's a organization which is based up in the western corridor of the Serengeti, and they engage with local communities as well as obviously practice conservation within the Grumeti Game Reserve, the area that we were working in. And we're more than happy if anyone wants to reach out to Black Bean Productions to guide anyone in the right direction with regards to wanting to get involved, wanting to volunteer, or contribute in some way with regards to assisting human wildlife conflict, or at least the area that we operated in.
Absolutely. So we can put that information in the description of the Eventive page. So if you guys want to go find out more, you can go click those links. But thank you so much, James, for joining me today and having your film in our festival. I think it's a really important story to share. So I'm really grateful for having that.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate you guys watching the film, and would love to hear your feedback once you've watched it.